What does it take to be a successful entrepreneur? A dangerous amount of coffee and a ton of grit. My name is Jason Tracy, and every week I interview business leaders to share their stories, life lessons, failures, and advice with you. Welcome to Coffee and Grit. What is freaking up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Coffee and Grit. Wow, it's been a minute since I've been in this chair, everybody. Last episode I filmed was with Hayden Lawrence. It was out a couple weeks ago, and it was really an impromptu episode of just having a young, hungry entrepreneur sitting in the seat. And we started off an impromptu conversation and was able to roll that out. And so, I've given you all loyal listeners an opportunity to catch up on old episodes, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I've gotten some great feedback from people that have told me that they've been able to catch up on some past episodes as we put out, this last little bit, an episode every other week. And so, used to having an episode every week. We've now slowed down and have been doing it every other week. And, it's just been a huge learning curve, putting everything together in the studio, getting clients, bringing on business, creating systems and processes. All the entrepreneurs out there know exactly what I'm talking about. But I'm telling you what, when you start taking on an increase and a flux of things, even though it's exciting and it's the stuff that I've been thinking about doing for a really long time, it can get overwhelming. And so happy to say, putting the systems and processes in place, and am now going to stop neglecting Coffee and Grit. We'll have it lined up where we're bringing our guests back on, but I thought it was really appropriate to take this time, do a solo episode, and really just catch everybody up, because wow, since May, it has been just ground running. I've been really out, talking passionately all day and all week about what we're working on and what we're doing. And it's one of those things I have not taken the time to sit down and do an episode about this, because we got to document this. This is, like I said, a really growing time, a really freaking exciting time. Yesterday I was out at the Crunchy Pickle in Howell and doing a video shoot for my client, difference maker, Heather Ruby, who has a company called Haven AI. And this app is built for caregivers to give support to the caregivers and emotional intelligence, and a friend that has medical knowledge. You've all seen her on the show and can check out her content on her social media platform at Haven AI. But I was out and we were at the Crunchy Pickle and doing a video shoot, and this is something that I've always dreamed of. And it's not about even thinking about going back in this time and thinking about this podcast, right? And, starting off the podcast, this is something that starting out my business, I got a coach and he had started talking about creating content. And it was something that as I was meeting up and having conversations with people, I just saw this real big opportunity that went outside of me trying to create this purposeful, forced content that I'm doing in my living room or in my office, wherever I'm trying to create content all by myself to be this thought leader, to give advice. And in the meantime, I'm going out and having these really authentic, really fire conversations with other entrepreneurs, other coaches, other consultants, other speakers. And I'm like, wow, this is, I wish we had a camera, because wow, this is great content. It's great content for me. It's great content for the person that I'm talking to. And so I did. I went out and I got a camera, I got a GoPro, and I'd bring it along with me. And, loyal listeners, you've heard this conversation over and over again, but I think it's really pertinent, especially if you're listening for the first time, how things really come about. I talked about it in the last episode with Hayden Lawrence, and how he's a new entrepreneur and he's helping people with their brand recognition. They're creating their reputation, with Google reviews, for example. And as he's working with them, I'm like, you're starting to learn your craft. You're going to start to really learn and find opportunities where you can get better, but you're also going to find opportunities where you can serve that client and that person and that business at another level. And it's going to constantly form and morph. And that's exactly what happened here. I think, that's one of the commonalities with difference makers. When I talk about difference makers, difference maker entrepreneurs are the people that are out there, they're solving problems. They're solving problems for people, right? And a lot of times they're solving the problems that they themselves encountered. That was me. When I started my business, it was like, how in the world am I going to share my level of expertise? How am I going to share my stories? How am I going to, make a difference and get a crowd, create my brand? Because how much can we go out there really and just talk people's ear off and tell our story? So I knew that I needed to create content. I was solving a problem that I myself had experienced when I started my business. Like I said, it was very hard to just sit and create content. And then I see so many entrepreneurs that are just like myself trying to throw so many things at the wall and hoping that something sticks. And when do we know when it sticks? Because we're not being consistent enough. We're not creating a plan and a strategy. We're not being intentional. We're not being authentic. We're not being vulnerable. A lot of times the stories that we're really in our head about sharing, we don't feel like we can share. And that's the gold. So many times I've sat down with somebody and as they're telling their story or we're having a conversation, I'm like, oh my God, you need to share that. And they're like, oh, that story, I could never share that. That's embarrassing. I referenced a few weeks ago when I was talking to Steve Ziskowski, a young man that's going through Difference Maker Boot Camp, and how he had a very powerful story about his dad and connecting it with life insurance, and how he was very vulnerable. And how he was very vulnerable about sharing that story because he thought that people would look and say that his dad was stupid, and that wasn't how he felt about his dad. And I was, so again, we get in our own heads about our stories. Now, I got a call from, and I'll give you a shout out if you're listening. I got a call from this young man last week, and he was getting, he said two things, and he had two things for me. And the second thing was, hey, I got a chance to listen to that episode the other day, and I heard you telling my story. And I'm like, oh man, that's what I get. This is the inside stuff for you all listening to Coffee and Grit. I'm a real person. If you don't know me, I am a real person. I do have real clients. I do tell real stories, right? I do have real experiences. And so I'm out there and I'm telling these stories because stories are data with soul. I get so excited to share these stories. And I see someone like this young man that like he has an opportunity to make such a huge difference by just sharing that story and being able to serve people at a higher level just by sharing that story, right? And so I'm like, let's get out of our head. And sometimes you got to call people out. And I did that. I shared that story. But then, on the flip side, when I now got to have a face-to-face conversation with this person, and they're like, "Oh, you called me out in a public place." Now he didn't say that, but he did say I took it on the chin. But then I learned from it. And he's like, and I've used it this week, and I've had conversations this week with people, and I've been able to close clients this week on life insurance because I've shared that story. And that's what I mean, everybody. Let's get out of our freaking heads. We got to get out of our heads. Share our story, share our differences, because again, the best of us, the difference makers, we're solving a problem. We're solving a problem for people. We're solving real problems that people are experiencing every single day. And these problems are creating pain. All right. They're creating pain in their life. And a lot of times, when we're in boot camp, I'm really stressing to people that pain, people aren't buying from a place of logic. People are buying from a place of emotion. And what we're missing in our sales process, when we know we can solve a problem, when we know we can serve somebody and help somebody, is that we don't want to be sound salesy. And so we miss that opportunity because we don't want to throw out and say, oh my God, you should pay money for me. And here's a good example. Just yesterday, I was having a conversation with a young lady that I see a ton of her content, and she's putting this content out there, and I didn't know how her business was doing. I would think by the content that she's putting out there that she's absolutely crushing it. She has a very niche thing. She talks about uncomfortable topics that are be uncomfortable for most people. But that's exactly where the magic is at, because most people feel uncomfortable about those topics, and so many people want to master that. Right? They want to master what she's doing. And so I see this genius that she's doing. And then she starts telling me, she asked me the question. And this is so funny because those of you that listen to this episode know that I'm the wrong person to ask this kind of advice. She starts asking me, she booked the meeting with me because she wanted to ask me, like, if this business doesn't work out, this thing that she's doing, because, it's not making enough money right now, and she's living off from her savings. And when her savings dwindle, she's like, I've got 6 months. I've got 6 months to make this, right? But in the meantime, I'm going to start looking for jobs. And, and she starts telling me these places that she'd like to hang her hat on and affiliate herself with to be aligned with the things that she's doing. And she wanted to get my advice on that. And I had to take a deep breath and say, I'm the wrong person to give the advice on the parachute, right? Because I see this thing that you're doing. I see this difference that you're making, and I see this thing that that makes you a difference maker, that makes people, like, you're going to pull people in. Now, what I would question is, where are the gaps? Where are you missing the opportunities to make money? How much money do you need to make? Like you're talking about going and getting a job because you're dipping into your savings, right? And so my question for you is how much money a month do you need to make in order to keep from touching your savings? So you don't have to touch your savings account. She told me that number and it wasn't a crazy number, right? It's not something that can't be done. It's something that can very easily be done. And so I asked her that question. She told me, and so I asked her that question and she told me the number. And this is not a crazy huge number. This is not something that's impossible. In fact, it's very reachable, very possible. And so I think about like not only that question, but what does it take? Okay, if, like anything after that amount of money, you can now start putting money back in your savings account, right? And you can now give yourself more time. So instead of searching for the backup plan, because here's the deal. If you're giving yourself a backup plan, you might as well just go back and work full time right now. Just go ahead and go because you're giving yourself an out right now. And if this is my only thing, if this business, if what I'm doing right now is the only way I'm going to survive, I'm gonna have to figure it out, right? And so as I'm asking her these questions and I find out she's doing these impactful, life-changing coaching sessions. And she's like, it takes several sessions for somebody to get to realize the impact that I'm making. And then I try to sell them. And then, they usually say, I make a big, you made a big change in my life. You changed my life. But I think I'm fixed now, right? Because they came to her with a surface problem. She helped them go deeper, change their lives and really start to build a foundation. But there's another layer to go. There's more work to be done. However, why buy the milk when you can get the cow for free? And when you're doing 3 coaching sessions with somebody, no matter how much impact you've made in their life, why in the world would they ever pay for it? Right? And so I'm like, listen, this lady just told me that she is cooking on her savings. She's living off of her savings, right? She's only got 6 months in order to make this happen, or she's got to get a job. And I asked her for money. I told her I can help you, but this is what I do. And this is what I do for a living. This is my job. This is my difference, the difference that I make. This is my expertise. And I'm more than happy to sit down with you for a coaching session because I can see this is going to change your life. Now you got to do it. Right. I had some, this is going to be in depth. It's not going to be something that's going to be forced because right now, over this course of time that I've known her, she has invested in a lot of different programs. And even as we were talking yesterday, she was talking about the different marketing systems and structures and sales coaches and everybody has this system or framework or can't miss, get rich quick scheme, blah, 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 blah. But if it's not your system and you don't feel comfortable doing it, if they're trying to change your fundamental system and who you are, you're not going to be comfortable, confident, or clear. And guess what? You're going to fail over and over and over again. And then you're going to feel like it's your fault. No, what we got to do is we got to design the system around who are you, right? And so I'm asking her, like, when you're successful with your clients, what are you doing? When you're making the most impact, what's the system and the process that you're following, right? Once you get them to that point in that 3rd session, right? And now let's design packages around, 3 sessions, boom, you can make a major impact. And after 3 or 4 sessions that they're ready to go, they were going to be more ready to go to their next level. Let's charge them here, right? So it's all like creating this system and this process and creating clarity around what it is that she's already doing. It's converting in seeing a couple of things that she's doing really well and pulling people in. Let's pour some gasoline on this and create more revenue. But most importantly, it's not just a money grab. We're going to make more impact. We're going to make more difference. And that's, again, what I love about difference making entrepreneurs and what I love about working with them. And a lot of times it's just getting out of their head because they're so self-conscious that they're not making a difference, even though they see it, right? And they're so afraid to ask for people's money. It would have been an uncomfortable situation, and most people wouldn't have had that conversation that I had with her yesterday. And I, with a straight face, said, "You need to invest money in me." And she, you know what? She, bless her heart, she asked me, "Would you be willing to do this session for free?" And my question is, what kind of coach would I be if I was telling you, you need to charge, but I'm going to give you my works and my services for free? So there's the first thing. 1. 2, There's two reasons why I charge money for what I do. One, I never want to grow resentment for what I do. I've had situations where I've wanted to help somebody in the past, or I've done a trade situation where they're supposed to give me something, and then I feel like I'm giving them far more. And you know what the funny thing is? The people that want the discounts, or they want the free, or they want to do trade because they don't have money, those are often the worst freaking clients. Who say an amen if you agree with me there, right? They're the worst clients. They're the ones that have the most complaints. They're the ones that are messaging you at night to tell you the things that you did wrong. And fuck you, man. Like, you didn't even pay me. So anyways, I don't want to have any kind of resentment when this person's messaging me, like at least they're paying clients and I have an appreciation for them. If you're getting something for free, get off my ass, freeloader. You know who you are. Anyways, so sorry, that got extremely personal. Anyways, number three, and this is actually number two, the number two reason why I charge, but number three in this list that I'm going through is that people don't have value on free stuff. So if I'm coaching you and I'm sitting and I'm listening to you and I'm giving you life-changing advice, like I was giving her life-changing clarity yesterday, do I have a high confidence that she's going to take it and run with it? No, I don't. Because I could sit and give her free. She's come to me several times and picked my brain, knowing exactly what I do, getting free advice, and I haven't seen her take it one single time. And so here, you know what? The buck stops here. And either you're going to become a client, and I'm going to help you change your life, or you're never going to call up and ask for a free session again, right? And so one of two things happen there. And so I'm saying this to everybody for her sake, if she's listening, because here's the deal, right? You can either take action or you can continue struggling. There's a path here for you, and it's very clear. You can make a small investment now and you can start making changes. But for all the entrepreneurs out there that are trying to force people, right? Either I can help you or you can't, right? If you're sitting here and you're telling me that you know that I can make an impact for you and you can make a difference, then what's stopping you from doing it? Sometimes you just got to be like Nike and you just got to do it. Okay? All right. Thank you for being there for me in this passionate tirade. I hope you're getting a lot out of this. This is just freaking raw. And that's what I love about being in the studio is just coming and just being able to just roll with it. And I've been getting so much feedback with the conversations that we have had from the podcast that this is the realest that it's ever been. So again, super appreciate that. And that's what it's freaking all about. It's what it's all about is creating content that is real. It's telling those stories, it's pulling people in. And, I've been doing this for a while where I've been working with people, I've been working with clients and I've been coaching them, and as you're coaching people on sales is really great when you have people walking in the door, when you have no shortage of leads, right? Because you can sit and you can work the process and it's easy. I break it down into four really core pillars into your into your sales process. And so you can think about it, you can really simplify it down, right? Think about, you got to connect. I got to build a connection with somebody, right? And, they got to know me, like me, and trust me. And so as I'm having a dialogue, I've got to do that. And how do you do that? Well, a big part of it is the next pillar is discovering, just discovering who that person is, what their challenge is. How can I serve them? Lately, in just this conversation yesterday that I just got done talking about, this was a conversation and she called me several times. And yesterday I was just like, this is where the rubber meets the road. And we're either going to, have this conversation, you're going to be a client or you're not. So as I'm working with people through sales, if they're not getting leads, it's like, great. I'm ready. I'm just ready to get the practice in, right? But nobody's walking in. How do I get people? And so what I would end up doing, because I love this stuff. I mean, you guys have seen me on the podcast and it's really like, I get energy. I have a curiosity. I love hearing from the person across from me. I don't do many of these solo episodes like this because I get all this energy again from across the other side of the table. And then looking at the core reasons why I started the podcast anyways was, again, trying to grow in that marketing standpoint of, if I have a guest on my podcast and we're now cross marketing and I'm able to pull in their audience and they can start listening to me as well, right? And so that's really worked. Having guests on that, as I'm asking them really good questions, I've gotten coaching clients, I've gotten clients, and again, a big source of my business over the last year and a half has been creating content out of the podcast. I have people come onto the podcast, and we have this, hour, 90-minute conversation that has just incredible content, incredible clips that pull people in. As I'm putting them out throughout the course of the week, they're getting a lot of attention, and they're getting clients out of it, they're getting phone calls, they're getting messages, they're getting new employees, they're getting brand, you know, they're getting brand recognition. What I love to say is they're dominating a space, right? And those very people, when they struggle creating content, why would you come on this podcast? Why are you, I was just talking to somebody and they were wanting to get booked on more podcasts. My first question is why? Why do you want to be on podcasts? And the answer was, I want to grow my business. I want to, get exposed to people outside of my network. She's like, is podcasting a good way to go? Yeah. If that's the case, yeah, I think it is a good way to go in getting booked on other people's podcasts, and it's being strategic, right? If you want to expose yourself to more people that you currently don't know, it's great to find podcasters that align with what it is that you talk about, what the difference that you make in the world. And you can search for those people. It's boiling down to science, the reticular activation system. I hope you guys can stay up with my ADD brain today, because it's just firing, right? The reticular activation system, you might have heard me time and time again. This is the science behind how sales, marketing, relationships, everything works, because we have this filter back here at the base of our spinal cord, and it tells us, it helps us, helps us pull in everything that's happening and interpret and decipher everything that's happening in the world on any given moment, at any given second. And it does it based off our filter and our alignment of how we view the world and what we see as important, right? And so, just to break it down in a simple matter, if you ever bought a new car and you've never seen that car on the road before, and now all of a sudden you see that car everywhere, that's because now all of a sudden that car is important to you. That car was always there. I hate to break it to you. You're not a trendsetter. You didn't buy this car and everybody else said, oh, I'm going to buy that car because Brenda did. Nope. It's always been there, but your mind, your eyes, you never recognized it before because there was never any importance to it. Now it's important to you. So people are telling me I'm struggling creating content. And especially people that get exceptionally frustrated when they were on my podcast and they're sitting in a studio with professional cameras, professional audio equipment. Man, it's really just a reputation booster. It's a lot of credibility, like I said. And when what I do, I'm like an artist. It's pulling out the best of stories, the biggest differences out of you. And so there's so much content that you can create and cut and put out there on social media that captures a whole new audience, right? And so that's what I'm all about. I would have never honestly done a podcast if it wasn't for giving me an opportunity to sit down and take long form content and turn it into short content. And I think a lot of people, the reason why you start a podcast as an entrepreneur, you start a podcast because you want to gain business. You want to put yourself out there as the voice, as a expert, so to speak, in your field. You want to dominate, right? You want to be able to send out resources to clients. And what happens is you get a podcast, and many times that podcast becomes another job. It becomes another business because you think that you're just going to roll out a podcast and people are going to listen. No, it takes its own work to it, right? You got to show up every week. You got to post. You got to create clips out of it and put it out there. And because if not, who's watching it? Who's just stumbling upon this hour-long podcast? And so you're creating the content, you're creating the clips, and that's a lot of work, right? And you're trying to get it out there. Well, so how I look at this is taking that long podcast and turning it into short form content. And I was doing this with my guests. I was doing it with my clients. And there was only so many times or so many, I get one episode a week that I had at the studio, that at the Speakeasy studio. And it was just really a blockage. Now, in the meantime, I've been working with a client for a little over a year. And Kevin Brown, he owns Garrett Truck and Auto Repair. He owns Motor City Truck Collision here in Brighton. And he came to me with, hey, I want to influence my industry. I don't know if I want to get into consulting, possibly get into consulting, but I want to influence my industry because so many people become, they are great mechanics and they start a business or they buy a business and they're shitty business people and they're running themselves out of business and they're impacting the whole industry because now we're all trying to combat, Tom's Garage shitty prices. And so I want to get information out there that is raw and, I want to get it out there to be able to help change the industry. So he comes to me and the only way that I could think of to do this was to have him on my podcast. And so I had him on. And again, if you're a listener, you've heard Kevin Brown, 3 episodes that he did within a couple month period. And so I'd have him on the podcast and the podcast was really valuable because Kevin's a genius at what he does. I've now gotten a chance as we've partnered up to work very intimately with him. And I've said this. I've worked with a lot of business consultants. I've worked with a lot of brilliant and ingenious business people. I've never met anybody that is as genius with numbers as Kevin is. And we affectionately call him Rain Man because he can literally do the math in his head. And as we work with clients, I've never seen anybody be able to shred the numbers like he does and asking the questions. Just for example, a new client we're working with in just the last 4 weeks has been able to pay down $100,000 on his credit card bill. Just there's a lot of money that we found, a lot of opportunity that we found, a lot of life changes that are happening. But that's just a really good example of something that's happening. I mean, could you come up with $100,000 in 4 weeks to pay on a credit card bill? And that's a serious question. This guy, we were able to find $100,000, so to speak, in his couch cushions. And that's something that, again, Kevin being from that genius level of what he's doing, it's just fun to watch. But he comes to me and we have these 3 episodes that we're putting out and I'm taking and I'm creating content and clips out of it and I'm putting them on his pages and we're creating a following and the clips are doing really well. And one clip ended up just exploding and is sitting around, it's close to 1 million followers or 1 million video views. It's actually over 1 million video views. It was close to 1 million on Instagram. We since shared it on TikTok as well, and it did another 500,000 views. And so we're over 1 million views on this clip, right? And just things are chugging along, and he's starting to get this attention. And then he decides I'm going to create a podcast, and so he starts his own podcast called Repair Shop Reckoning, and he's doing it at the same studio I'm doing it out of at Speakeasy there. And I'm taking his clips and I'm putting them out there and editing them. And what happens is we start really gaining attention because there's consistency, because he has a niche market, right? He's speaking to shop owners, he's speaking to mechanics, he's speaking to people in the auto repair industry. And so it's a very niche market. He's coming to them with real actionable, like real hardcore stuff. Some of it is stuff that pisses people off, right? But it's stuff that people need to hear. And because of that, it created a big following. And so TikTok, within 4 months, we gained 15,000 followers. We had over 100,000 views in that first, back in end of May or beginning of May, as we end of April, beginning of May, we were able to see over 100,000 views, which got his Repair Shop Reckoning TikTok page, became a TikTok, became monetized with TikTok, became part of the creator funds. And so we got together to talk about what are we going to do to take this thing to the next level, because we decided, and Kevin offered me to split the funds on TikTok in order to take this to the next level and what we could do. And so I met up with him and he came out to his shop out here at Motor City here in Brighton off of Emerson Drive. And he said, hey, before we have a conversation, let me show you something. And he opens up this door and the first thing I see is this brick wall that's currently behind me. And he's like, what do you think if we made our own content studio out of here? And then you'd have a place to do your podcast. I have a place to do mine. If you have clients, you want to bring them in. And it just started off as a discussion like that. Now, he didn't know. I just went through Kevin Sabowski's Growing a Brilliant Business program, and I had written down on my 3-year goal to have my own content studio. And, it's something that I was hoping would happen sooner than 3 years, but I was kind of thinking realistically, getting all the equipment, the space, finding a space, all that kind of stuff. Let's put it on the 3-year goal sheet. And within a couple of months, I'm able to get that knocked out. Me and Kevin, like I said, since that time, it's been hard at work. I had never used equipment like this before. We're talking about professional cameras, professional videos, lighting, setting up this whole entire space, the ambience, all the technology, and then also turning it into a business, because again, there are so many entrepreneurs, there's so many difference making entrepreneurs that just need to create real marketing, that just really need to create that in a strategy that is actually getting them something, because there's so many marketers out there. And you think about even creating newsletters or creating social media posts for people that are, they're not mastering that person's voice and that person's business. With what I'm doing, with what we're doing, and what my vision is with this content studio is, we're really, and what I've been doing with the Coffee and Grit podcast is you've listened to the episodes, you see kind of the magic that I pull out from guests that really share their story and their vibe, right? Really capture a know, like, trust. I know from my loyal audience, from you listeners, the people that have reached out to me and asked me, how can I get a hold of this person? How can I get a hold of this person? I've heard from my guests that are like, wow, I've gotten so many messages and I've gotten so much business out of this. And so many people have, reached out or come in that said they saw me on this podcast or listened to this episode and they love this part or they love that part. And so this is what I've been doing. And now it's turning it into a business plan that goes outside of this podcast, right? It's bringing in entrepreneurs, or what's really cool is being able to go outside of the studio. Because we have this whole studio that we have a space. It's beautiful. We have this side over here. Oh, I don't have my camera on over there. I'd show you the other side. But if you've seen it, if you've been watching the episodes, we have a couple couches over here. We have a good sized room. We're not done, customizing it and everything else yet, but the sound is great. We've got professional equipment. I mean, this camera lens I got is popping. Like it's super fun to get in and just really create this stuff. It's fun being in the studio and just jamming here by myself, but it's really fun getting clients in here that we can get through the nerves. We can create a strategy with how we're going to talk about this, and then I can just go through and get them comfortable and ask them questions and lead the way to create content based on what is it. Are their desired results? Are they looking for more clients? Are they looking to grow their brand? Are they looking to educate? Or are they looking to create videos that we can get out to clients that, again, educate them on how to maintain their generator, for example, for long-term health. Because we worked with the Noonan team, Mike Noonan. They light up your life with everybody except the Amish, right? And I love everything he's got going on, his brand colors. He's so much his brand. He's so successful. We're really lucky as entrepreneurs to be able to talk and hang out and rub elbows with a guy like Mike Noonan, because he's at a certain level in his business where he's not, those guys aren't usually rubbing the elbows and doing the networking stuff, but because he opened up another location, he got great energy off him going back into the grind and doing things, meeting, kissing the baby, shaking the hands, building the relationships, most importantly. And so we're lucky from that standpoint. But going out for Mike, he's got a really awesome location, so he doesn't necessarily need the studio. He's got a really cool location, really cool lighting, a part of his story, a huge part of his brand. And so instead of having him come to the studio, I went to him. And so we take out the equipment and we sat down for an hour, and I just guide him through a conversation that then creates so much incredible content that he can then put video content out there. And it's not just the video content, it's taking the transcript and creating posts that go along with it. So it's a plug and play, because what I've noticed is, I've given, when I started creating videos for people out of the podcast, they still wouldn't post it. And I'd follow up with them and be like, hey, why haven't you put the post out? And it's because they'd be stuck at, what do I write? How do I put this post out there where it performs? Or I saw somebody put a video out there and they just shared it with nothing, that would help carry and engage that post. And so to give people really a leg up, not have to think about it, because this is the part they struggle at. What they want to do is have their voice mastered, create content that really makes an impact, really pulls people in, really engages people, right? And maybe it's video, maybe it's just posting, but you're getting reactions, you're getting content. Most importantly, you're generating conversations, which leads to business, and it leads to increased brand dominance, right? I love going out and people say, I've seen you everywhere. I see you everywhere. I love hearing from my clients that they get seen everywhere. Heather Ruby from Haven AI that we were talking about earlier, that I did the video shoot out at the Crunchy Pickle yesterday. She was on a plane. They're from Howell, Michigan. They were on a plane in Atlanta, boarded the plane. The flight attendant came up to her and her husband and said, are you from Haven AI, or do you work with Haven AI? They have a caregiver app that's for mental health for caregivers. And she's like, oh my God, that's my app. Well, she had seen her content online. So these videos, this content, we've never lived in a better time to be able to go out and use the tools and the resources to create brand domination, to tell our story, to create a platform where we create know, like, trust, and create content that works while we're sleeping, while we're playing, while we're out at the lake, while we're golfing 9 or we're golfing 18, right? While we're hanging out with the family, or while we're in meetings, whatever it is that we're doing while we're sleeping, this content is being viewed while I'm sleeping, right? And so how do we create content that's out there that's working for us? It's creating an ROI and doing the work for us when we can't be at work. This is putting gasoline all over the efforts. And why I love working why my target market, why my niche market are difference-making entrepreneurs is because they're already doing the things. They've already built relationships. They're already taking care of people. They already have a brand, a product, a service that, that really changes lives or makes a huge impact. And people like them. So once you create that content and you put that video out there, it pulls those people in. It creates and then you use it as a strategy, right? You're out there and you're meeting people, and then you pull them into your social media. Your friend requests them, you connection request them on LinkedIn, you follow them on TikTok or Instagram, wherever they're at. If I go to a networking meeting and I'm meeting people for the first time, or if people come and they're as their guests to my networking meetings at CirrusNet, for example, I will find them on social media and connect with them, because what I'm doing is I'm pulling them intentionally into my machine. I'm pulling them into where I'm creating the content, and people get to see who I am as a person, who I am as a coach, who I am as a speaker, who I am as a podcaster. You get to know me all together. And guess what? Those people don't differ. I'm not a different coach than I am a person that hangs out with my husband. I'm going to keep that in. I'm not even going to edit it because that's funny. I'm not a different person when I hang out with my wife and my kid. I'm not a different person, so like I'm not a different person when I'm playing basketball. I'm not a different person, when I'm selling. And that's the really cool thing. And the thing we teach you in boot camp is to master who you are and making that a big part of that's your strategy, your core, that is your core as you're doing business. You're one person. You're not putting on different hats, and you're mastering you, pulling out your differences, and you're selling with excitement because they see your difference, right? And so that's what's really fun. But this content, it works, right? And so when you pull that strategy, and again, use that strategy, go out and connect with people. So often you see people in networking meetings that are trying so hard to sell because they think that there's not going to be another opportunity. To go off the wall, Barry Sanders used to not celebrate touchdowns because his dad used to tell him, act like you've been here before. And that's exactly it. Act like you've been here before, and you're going to be here again, and you're going to have opportunities to build on this relationship. You don't need to sell everybody right now. Let's create relationships. Let's create connections that can then bring them into my social media that will help strengthen that connection, or maybe it will repel them. Maybe they don't like my content. Maybe they don't like me. Maybe they don't like what I stand for, or you. And that's okay. That's actually really, really good, right? Because a lot of times we're trying to be someone else to fit every mold, and then we're not happy, right? Create a business that you're happy doing. You're happy serving the clients that you're serving. You're not compromising your clients. You're not working with people that piss you off, right? You're pulling in the right people. And that's when you're doing your marketing right. That is exactly what it's doing. And so that's what this is all about. Loudmouth Studio. It's about making content, making it easy. It's about taking, sitting down for an hour and creating a month's worth of short form content. It's like creating, and my client Sparkle Lindsay, who's been on this podcast twice. We actually met because I reached out for her to be on the podcast from LinkedIn, and we built a beautiful relationship. And I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to be Sparkle's coach as she's grown something really freaking cool, and she's dominating. And she's been on so many podcasts and shows, But as I'm creating content for her, I'm noticing you're running out of really good in-person content. In fact, you don't have any more that I could possibly cut and edit for you that you could put out there. And those clips are generating followers and traffic for her business for her. It's creating more know, like, trust with her following, which is created over the years so many opportunities. It's created school districts that are reaching out to her and paying her to reshape their curriculum. It's created different states calling her up to get her to coach and train their recovery coaches, right? And so it's created so much business, and so she has to keep doing it. And so I'm like, hey, either get on more in-person podcasts or fly out to Michigan and we'll do a content day, right? And so she was like, done, let's do it. And so she's coming out. She'll be out here mid-September. And so she'll be out here mid-September and she'll be in the studio and we're going to have several outfit changes. We'll be in here for several hours. We're going to have her on Coffee and Grit. And so you'll get to see her again. And then we're going to do just other content throughout the day. We're talking about throwing together a motivational speaking event where we can get her in front of a crowd and get content of her speaking and, create reels that show her off as a keynote speaker that help her get more jobs that way. And so when you think about how you can use this studio, and then boom, she comes out here once, and then for those hours, we're going to put together content for the next several months that we'll be able to plug into her machine. She'll be able to create difference-making content that is going to look so freaking good. It's going to look so much better than the stuff that she's doing remotely, right? It's going to put her on another element, right? It's going to give her that, it's going to build her brand. It's going to give her that momentum. And so I'm so freaking excited to have her out here doing that, but it's this whole opportunity, right? And it's got to be, when you're doing new things, it's so freaking uncomfortable. And sometimes you got to go backwards in order to go forwards. It was so hard to leave Speakeasy. And, I appreciate the relationship and everything that they've done for me with Coffee and Grit and putting it on another level, just introducing me to a studio, right? And then all of a sudden having to produce the content myself and some of the learning curve. I got pointed out on the Steve Ziskowski episode, for example, as I was going to the bathroom, I didn't cut that part out. And so there's stuff in there that's like, it's humbling, it's funny, but at the same time, this is raw and real, and I'm embracing this journey as we go because let's freaking go, right? This is so much fun. I've said all the time, hell is meeting the person that you could have been. And I believe in my whole heart now that I'm on the path that I'm supposed to be, because I'm helping entrepreneurs put that gasoline all over their business development, from Difference Maker Bootcamp to Loudmouth Studio. It's taking that gasoline and pouring it all over their efforts so they create a fire. They create a momentum that changes and makes a difference in lives across the world. And as we string these together, how much difference and impact can we make? That's what is so freaking excited to me, because again, video is king. Short clips is everything. Our attention span is very fleeting, right? You got to create something that pulls people in like that. And if I'm trying to pull you into an hour and a half long podcast, that can be daunting. But to put a video clip out there that really resonates with my audience, I can hit 1,000 views very organically, just like that. And so that's where it's all about. I have people that have come up to me and told me, "Oh, I watch all your podcasts," and they tell me about the clip they watched that was a minute long. That's not my podcast, right? That's a part of the podcast. They didn't go watch the full podcast, but they're getting to know me, like me, trust me, and do business with me from the short clips. All right, I'm going to get off my soapbox now. I really appreciate you listening. Hopefully you were able to get some fire, some passion, some really actionable ideas. And hey, if you're sitting there and you're anything like me and you're stuck creating your content, you're throwing things at the wall, you're sitting there questioning whether your efforts are worth it, just give me a call, because the first step is just really sitting down and understanding your situation, what you want to happen, what difference you're making in the world. It all starts with a conversation, and then we can give you an outlook of what that may look like and what we could do. And maybe we can't do something for you, but it all starts with that conversation. Listen, y'all, thank you for listening again. And until next time, go out there and fucking kill it. Make your difference shine, right? All right, everybody.